This is Walt Disney World Today. Give us 5 minutes and we'll give you the world.
It's Friday, January 20th, 2006, and this is episode number 51 of Walt Disney World Today. I'm Matt Hochberg from MGMstudios.org. Our panel today includes the lovely Mary Waring of MouseSavers.com. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you.
And we've also got staff columnist and trip planning guru of MousePlanet.com, Mike Scopa. Welcome, Mike.
Roll out the red carpet. Hiya, Matt.
And Mike Newell of Mouse World Radio rounds out our panel. Welcome, Mike.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Today we're going to be discussing some of the changes to the annual pass discount program as well as the price increases to the Magic Your Way tickets. I think we'll start off with the Magic Your Way pass changes. And Mary, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit first about what these changes are and then how it affects them?
Well, in a nutshell, they all went up. They're all more expensive now as of January 1st. And
what kind of what kind of an increase are we looking at? Substantial?
in many cases it is substantial, and some of the parts that are most substantial are the additions to the base ticket. The base tickets themselves went up, varied tremendously depending on the number of days involved, but something at an average of 5%. But anything you want to add on is now a lot more expensive. For instance, if you want to add the park hopper option, that went up an extra $5 flat rate. The Water Park Fun and More, as they now call it, used to be called Magic Plus Pass, I think. Magic Plus Pack has gone up another $5. And the one that really is getting a lot of Disney fans is the 10-day ticket no expiration edition has gone up to $135 from $100. So that's a pretty big jump. So if you're one of those people who likes to buy a 10-day ticket, add the no expiration, and sort of use your days over the course of several trips, it's going to cost you.
Is this are the changes in general aimed at, what's Disney thinking? Other than covering their costs, with inflation and what have you, is there a method to their madness?
Quite honestly, I think that the parks have been busier than ever. They had, I think it was 8.5% upswing in admissions last year, and I think they're just pushing upward to see what the upper limit is and see if anybody pushes back. Would you say that these changes, especially with the 10-day ticket, are also a push, maybe to push some people over to the annual pass program?
That's what I was thinking.
That's certainly a possibility, and it is making less and less sense to buy that 10-day no expiration for most people because there are so many benefits associated with the annual pass that you don't get with that 10-day no expiration ticket. And so it's harder and harder to make a case for doing that no expiration ticket, and certainly adding that extra $35 isn't helping that.
Mike, did you have anything else to add about that? I don't want to.
No, I also was thinking as I looked at these changes, and oh my God, you think about when you want to add on the park hopper option. I think it's now over $40, and the prices that have just been realized now. I can't see anyone purchasing a 10-day Magic Your Way ticket instead of an annual pass, even if it's just for one person in the party, because as Mary said, there's so much to be realized from the annual pass. You can get a Disney dining experience. You don't have to. You can get all kinds of discounts on room rates, especially with the AP changes that we're going to talk about, how they've been reverted back to what they had been. I wonder if Magic Your Way's days are numbered. I really do.
Well, here's a significant number, I think. For a first-time annual pass purchase, you're only going to save. It's only going to cost you $40 more than buying the sort of loaded Magic Your Way 10-day ticket with the park hopper and the no expiration. But if you do a renewal, it's actually $2 cheaper than a 10-day ticket with the extras. So those numbers are getting closer and closer and closer than they were last year. And the temptation's definitely there to just buy the annual pass.
So let's tackle the real question here of the Magic Your Way tickets. And of course, I'm sure, Mary, you probably get the same question that we always get, and that's with these new ticket price increases, what is the if you're smart, what would be the cutoff point in terms of if you go to us after a certain amount of days, would it be better for you to change over to the annual pass rather than stick on the Magic Your Way path?
Well, technically it's 10 days or more, but I think it's kind of hard to say for any given situation because there are so many benefits, as Mike mentioned. You know, the free parking you get with annual pass holder, the ability to buy the dining. Help me out here. What's it called?
Disney dining experience.
Disney dining experience. Yes, you know, some of those things could make it It could be conceivable that it'd be better to buy an annual pass at 5 days, especially if you consider the annual pass holder discounts on resorts.
Yeah.
Hmm. So
I agree, Matt. I think that what Mary is saying here is that in the past, it was very easy to say, okay, I can remember 10 years ago saying the cutoff day was 8 days or 9 days or 10 days. Now it's not that simple. I think what you have to do when someone approaches and says, what should I do? Should I purchase a Magic Your Way ticket or should I purchase an annual pass? You have to sit down and say, okay, let's look at what your situation is. Let's look at where you want to stay, how you're going to do your vacation, what kind of an itinerary are you planning, what's your park touring habits, a whole bunch of things. Then you just make the two columns, and then and only then can you really say, okay, for you, John Doe, the annual pass is the best way to go. But for you, Jane Doe, maybe Magic Your Way is your best option. It's really an individual kind of a thing now.
Right. I can give you an example of somebody who might be better off to buy that 10-day no expiration ticket. That would be, say, somebody who owned a timeshare off-site, who cooks in the timeshare or eats off-site almost completely, so doesn't have any need for the Disney dining experience, doesn't have any need for the annual pass holder discount on-site, and who, you know, has been many times and only wants to go into the parks 2 or 3 days and is going to spread that ticket out over 3 or 4 years. Well, for them, it might make perfect sense to buy a 10-day Magic Your Way ticket with no expiration because they're going to get a lot of value out of that over a long period of time, which they wouldn't get from buying an annual pass because they'd only have 366 days to use it. So it's really variable.
And besides the annual pass aspect of it in terms of upgrading to it, are there any other changes, Mary, that you've noticed with the Magic Your Way tickets that have really stuck out in your mind as either something worth mentioning, like, oh, it's not worth it to do, you know, X or Y, perhaps?
Well, an interesting effect of the changes on the Water Park Fun and More option, as they're now calling it, which is the option that costs $50 plus tax and adds on water parks, Disney Quest, Pleasure Island, and so on, is that they've increased the number of visits included in that to sort of make up for the price increase. And that has a nice effect as you get into the higher tickets. You know, for a 10-day ticket, for instance, now you get 6 visits to water parks or Disney Quest instead of 5. But where you really see it sort of numerically making a lot more difference is in the 1 and 2-day tickets. It's fairly rare that somebody only wants to go into the parks 1 or 2 days and then wants to go to the water parks for 3 days. But there are people in that situation, especially people who are going in the summer and taking a lot of kids who would just rather play in the water for several days. And it's actually making that add-on kind of useful for a pretty good price on a 1-day ticket or 2-day ticket, because you get 3 visits now included with a 1 or 2-day ticket for $50 plus tax. So when you compare that with the cost of individual admissions to the water parks, that's a pretty nice thing.
And one last question about the Magic Your Way tickets, Mary. With the Disney packages that they offer, do you feel that the Disney packages they offer that include both resort accommodations as well as the tickets, do you see that being more lucrative now with the ticket increases?
Well, potentially, yes, sure. It really kind of depends on which promotions they end up rolling out, if any, this year in terms of packages. I think
Sure.
it's likely for some of the low time periods that they will, and that might make up for some of these cost increases. I think it's going to be, from Disney's side, they're going to be measuring if this has any effect. They really do seem to be on a scheme over the past several years to bump up these ticket prices very substantially each year and sort of sit back and see what happens. And so far, they're not seeing any problem with that. People are paying the money. Now, if people start sort of saying, well, I think I'll go to Universal for a couple of days, then Disney may roll out some promotions, which may not be specifically targeted at ticket prices, but effectively may be aimed at getting people to not be so concerned about the ticket prices. Because when it comes to a package, a lot of people aren't really conscious of how much they're paying for what. You're just paying flat rate, $1,500 or whatever it is, and you don't really think about the fact that you're paying $63 plus tax a day to the park, or whatever it works out to.
Excuse me. Mike Scopa.
Yes.
Yes. Quickly, do you give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to these ticket changes?
Oh, well, you're speaking to somebody who's had an annual pass for over 12 years. I don't like the way they're moving. I see a trend. I think that one of the things that bothers me the most is that it's confusing to the consumer, and I think that because it's so confusing that the consumer will not make the right choice for their own situation. So I give it a thumbs down because it's just making everything much more confusing. I mean, it's tough enough for us Disney nerds to keep up with it. I can't imagine how the casual Walt Disney World guest feels when he or she is faced with making this decision. So thumbs down.
Mary?
Yep. I was just going to say that ever since they rolled out Magic Your Way tickets, it's just become a much more complex decision to make because there's some number of 100 combinations.
Yep.
I want to say 400 combinations, something like that, when you consider all the possible options you can add on to these tickets. And, it's really tough. It's even been tough on ticket agencies that are selling these tickets. They can't keep the right things in stock because they can't really have inventory of X hundred types of tickets.
That's right. That's a good point.
So.
Well, in addition to the Magic Your Way changes, there have also been some changes to the annual pass discount program. Gone is the best rate program, and is it rest in peace for the best rate program, Mary?
Oh, I sure hope so. And I think many people feel the same way.
Can you just quickly explain what exactly has happened?
Well, Disney rolled out this best rate program at the end of last summer, which effectively replaced the old annual pass holder resort discount program. The old program allowed you to book right up until the last minute, usually starting about 2 to 4 months in advance. They would announce what the new discounts were for annual pass holders to buy resort rooms. And it was nice and easy. You called them up and said, I want a room, and if there were rooms available at that discount, you got them. Then they came up with this not-so-brilliant best rate plan, which required you initially to book 120 days in advance. And they got so much negative feedback about that they reduced it to 60 days in advance. The other hated feature about the best rate program was that it required a non-refundable deposit of one night's room and tax. So there was no flexibility. You couldn't book up until the last minute. This seemed sort of counterintuitive since a lot of annual pass holders, by virtue of being annual pass holders, like to go down there on the spur of the moment. And you couldn't do that anymore. So I have to say I got more mail on this subject than any other subject I've ever covered on my site in 5 years. And I was directing people, hey, send your comments to Disney. I can't do anything about it. And apparently Disney heard the complaints and has decided to go back to the old system by which you can book at up until the last minute. You pay a deposit of one night's room and tax, but it is refundable up until 5 days prior to check-in if you book by phone.
Hey, Mike Scopa, what's your inclination on the new changes to the annual pass discounts?
Well, one of the things that when I first heard of the changes, I tried to figure out what caused them to revert back to some of the old policies, and the only thing I can think of is, and Mary touched upon it, is that the best rate program really hurt their business in terms of those last minute decisions to, hey, let's go down to Disney next week. Let's see what we can get for an AP rate. you weren't seeing that. And I think that there may have been some dark nights in some rooms that were hurting them, and maybe it hit them in the wallet where it has to hurt before they make changes. I do like the idea that they reverted back to things like you can book up to 3 days prior to your arrival, and you can now book up to 3 rooms. I guess with the best rate, Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, you could only book 2 rooms with your annual pass. Was that correct?
You could actually book 3, but it was very problematic because the other aspect of the best rate program was it all had to be booked online. And you could only book 1 room at a time online. So you'd book one at the discount and just keep your fingers crossed that when you went back and tried to book your second room, there'd be a room available at that rate. And if you tried to do a 3rd room, it was very, chancy whether you were actually going to get all 3 of your rooms at the discount because you couldn't book them simultaneously.
Right. I do like the idea that they have gotten rid of I think it was a $50 fee if you needed to make a change in your room booking. I think you've got, is it 5 days? If you do it within 5 days of your arrival, I think there's a fee now. I think before
there was you would always lose your deposit under the old system as well as the new system if you cancel 5 days or less prior to your check-in. However, if you rebook within that 5-day period for another date, normally they'll waive any fees as long as you're booking something that's the same cost or higher. They'll just let you essentially move your deposit to a new booking.
I do like what has happened. I think that it's making a lot of people smile, and it's going to turn out to be a win-win situation for them. It's funny because it's very apparent that they're trying a whole bunch of things. They're trying different programs, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We talked about the Magic Your Way. We talked about the AP, and I think the next program on our docket that we may have to address will be Disney's Magical Express, and just how long it will last as a free service. My guess is that after 2006, or after the 50th Celebration on Earth party is over, I think that the guests will be paying for that service.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I think Len mentioned it on a previous podcast that it's likely to be gone, and it'll be still competitively priced, he thinks. But it's going to be. I think what it's done, and I know it's worked on me, is that you've seen the potential with it. I've done it, and it makes it so much easier just to have to save yourself a phone call, just have Disney do it for you, send you all the stuff, and you'll be sucked into it really. Even though you have to pay whatever the price is, because you'll figure, well, I got to pay somebody. I might as well just pay Disney and make it easier on myself.
Right.
So.
I don't know if it's been mentioned that was extended officially until the end of 2006. Technically, it was supposed to end in October because that's supposedly the end of the 50th celebration, but they have extended it.
It's gone for a little bit more. That's good. Mike Newell, do you think that these changes to the annual pass program are going to compel you to go more often?
Well, that's a good question. I'm an AP holder as well as DVC owner. So, being a DVC owner, it always paid for me to have the AP, and no matter how much it costs, if I go down 4 or 5 times a year, it was always a better bargain for me to buy the AP. Just recently this summer, we had guests down, and we had to get into the concierge line, and just to see the different changes that they made really knocked me out. They bring out this chart of what you can get, what you can add on, and it just seemed like it was very overwhelming. And like you said, to the Disney novice, it's got to be very hectic, very confusing.
And quickly, I'd like to maybe perhaps everyone's opinion on this is that I think in general most of us tend to be very pro annual pass in terms of encouraging people to get it, especially when they're kind of teetering on the brink of whether or not to get it or not. Do these changes? It seems to me that these changes with the Best Rate program disappearing, going back in essence to the old system of codes. Are we now even more pro annual pass than we were before, perhaps?
It certainly makes more sense. It was really pretty difficult for somebody who was debating whether to get an annual pass or not to decide before because of that long pre-booking requirement. It was the timing made it very, very difficult because if you didn't have an annual pass yet, you had to book 60 days in advance, and then you had to get the annual pass. But you had to have the annual pass before you could book with the Best Rate program. Now you're back to the old system where you can book the annual pass holder rate, and as long as you get that pass in time to check in, you're fine. So you don't have to have it at the time of booking.
One wonders, Matt, how many potential annual pass renewals were in danger had they not changed this program. Who knows how many annual pass holders had threatened to not renew the annual pass unless they changed this program. So that was in my mind. I think that those people who were annual pass holders are breathing easier now, and I think Disney is breathing easier now because they know that more than likely they will be able to hold on to their APs, and these guests will be throwing their money down to Disney now because things are back to almost what they were before.
That's a good point. Well, that's it for us today. This has been episode number 51 of Walt Disney World Today. If you want to find some older episodes, read our show notes, or send us your comments, please visit the Walt Disney World Today website at www.wdwtoday.com. You can also email us your questions at questions@wdwtoday.com. For Line Testa, Mike Scopo, and Mike Newell, and of course, the very lovely Mary Waring of HowSavers.com. Thanks for being on the show, Mary.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
I'm Matt Hochberg. We'll see you on the next show.